The committee will come to order. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here first thing this morning as we reconvene for a final time to complete our work. To recap, we have now held 2 markups for this proposal. We've delayed our proceedings twice now to afford Senate leaders time to discuss what procedures they may or may not employ when bringing our recommendations to the floor, if passed, even though those procedures are set in law. Despite my strong belief that our work should be in no way dependent on any floor agreement, during these delays I have worked with GOP leadership and our Republican senators to ensure that they're doing their part to address the concerns of our colleagues across the aisle. And with that, I would be very interested to hear the results of my distinguished co-chair's efforts to advocate directly with the Senate Minority Leader to do the same. And if I could get their attention, I will be happy to yield to my distinguished co-chair, Ms. Lowy of New York, for an update as to what her findings have been over the last 36 hours.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be here with all of you this morning. And as I have said before, I am very proud of the bipartisan work we have done to assemble this package of reforms to the budget and appropriations process. However, as I have raised for weeks, the lack of an agreement between Senate leadership on a fair and bipartisan process for floor consideration opens up our final product to partisan mischief that frankly could undo our work and worse, actually make the budget process even more difficult. So it is deeply disappointing to me and to many of my colleagues that despite the best efforts of our Senate colleagues, as I understand it, no such agreement has been reached. And as I have said, I'm not willing to advance this measure without an agreement between Senators McConnell and Schumer. Regrettably, I must vote no.
Mr. Chairman.
Chair will yield to the gentleman from Rhode Island.
If I could give a brief status report from the Senate side. I have been poking and prodding at this for some considerable period of time. And the determination that I have made is that from the majority's perspective, there is zero interest in giving any floor time whatsoever to this measure in the remaining period of this Congress. And therefore, an unwillingness to enter into a floor agreement that would provide that floor time to this measure. On the minority side, there is an unwillingness to proceed without a floor agreement because of the concern that whether you open the amendment process or whether you fill the tree with amendments, those could be poisonous amendments, and we'd like to know what that's going to look like before we get dragged down that road and so forth. So on both sides, there is no interest in going forward in this Congress. I don't think this is a partisan thing, and I'm not trying to take any partisan shots here. That's just the fact of the matter. The majority leader has better uses, in his view, for the time that remains in this Congress, and the minority has parliamentary prerogatives that it seeks to defend in the absence of an agreement, and therefore, there we are. There are 2 ways we could proceed. One way is to go ahead and vote this out, because I think substantively it has strong support, both bipartisan and bicameral. And then that puts it to the Senate as a privileged matter on the floor that can be brought forward and what is force a vote on a motion to proceed. If we do that, one of 2 things happens. One is that to protect the floor, the majority leader sees to it that the motion to proceed fails. In that case, a lot of people in the Senate have been forced to vote against this measure. And bringing it up later on, I think, would then be more difficult. The other is that you actually do prevail on the motion to proceed, and now, thwarted and frustrated, the majority leader might very well seek to take advantage, what would you say, if you have a disability, make use of it, make some lemonade out of the lemons that he just got, and use the parliamentary privileges that he had to the detriment of the minority. So neither of those, to me, looks very good. I have had continuing conversations with my Republican colleagues on this, and both leadership sides in the Senate have made it quite clear, I would say, in a very warm but non-binding fashion, that they would be happy to entertain this as a bill early in the next Congress when those floor concerns are less acute. They have no objection to the work we have done. They actually, I think, feel quite positively about it. But with the Congress ending, we're just in a tough position to have this compete with all of the other things that need to be addressed. So the solution for me, at this point, I really have trouble bringing myself to vote no after the work that has been done here, and I want to commend our chairman, our both chairmen, for the terrific work that has been done here. I note that there's been considerable goodwill, friendship, and good work that has been performed here in a bipartisan and bicameral way. I think that staff members have come to have trust and confidence, not only across the party aisle, but across the far more daunting center of Congress, so that Republican staff have come to actually like and respect Senate staff and vice versa. So I think we actually have a really good position here. I intend to vote present to reflect my satisfaction with the work here, but I hope by denying a vote that would force this to the Senate floor to avoid the predicament of having something come up on the Senate that would force the majority leader to whip for failure of the motion to proceed on the Senate floor, lest he lose the time. I can't think of a better way to do this. I don't think it's an ideal solution. And I would close by saying that it would be my very strong intention to offer our measure as a bipartisan bill with the support of colleagues who are here today in the next Congress, and energetically pursue it in regular order, and call on both the majority and the minority leaders to make good on the warm and positive commentary that they had about this once the time pressure was relieved. So that's where I at least think we are, and what I intend to do. But I remain highly gratified and proud of the work that has been accomplished here. I think we have surprised ourselves with how much we got done. I think we've actually surprised the Senate leaders on both sides with how much we got done, but they're in the situation that they are in as the clock runs down, and there's nothing that we can do about that here. So thank you very much, Chairman.
Ms. Lowy.
Hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you again to my co-chair. It's been a pleasure working with you. And my colleague, Senator Whitehouse, presents a very compelling argument. And because of the, frankly, good bipartisan work that has been done, understanding the procedures which you've laid out so convincingly, I would like to withdraw my no vote and switch it to a present vote. And then hopefully, because of all the good work and the discussions and the debate, we can, at an appropriate time, see this brought to the floor. So I thank you for sharing with me the procedures that I hope will take this bill forward. And again, I want to, as I said at the beginning, I want to thank you and Mr. Womack and all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. I think we've really had some very, what we call straight talk, honest, open debate. And again, as I said, I'll switch my vote from no to present. Okay. Thank you.
All good points. I'm going to yield to Senator Blunt here in just a minute. But just for the record, understand that the way the statute is written, it requires 5 votes on the Republican side and 5 votes on the Democrat side for passage. So voting present is essentially voting no because of the requirement for 5 and 5 for passage. I'll yield to the senator from Missouri.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and I want to thank you and the co-chairman both for the way this process has been managed. I think, frankly, the fact that we're generally all still attending is an indication that this may have worked better than I would have anticipated it worked. The structure is not a structure that I would have come up with, but I think the structure has kept us in a place where we legitimately debated what we thought could be done rather than run that debate for a field. Some of the amendments did that, but of course they were reflected in the results how that worked out. So coming up with a structure, which frankly the 2 Senate leaders were very involved in, produced a better result than we might have anticipated. Apparently the leaders were not aware that the November 30th deadline meant that the Congress would be about over. So I'm disappointed we couldn't figure out a way to get some necessary commitment that everybody now believes they need to get this to the floor. I will point out again that there is plenty of minority protection in anything that would have happened. 60 votes to go to the bill, 60 votes to approve any amendments to the bill, 60 votes to pass the bill. How that doesn't adequately protect the minority is a way that maybe only a longtime House member like me wouldn't understand, how 60 votes weren't enough protection. So one of the things I'm disappointed about what appears to be the outcome here, even with a lot of positive comments, is that at best we'll be able to say it almost worked and we almost got our job done. Make it harder to pursue this path another time, which I thought was one of the potential outcomes here of going back with a similar group at another time and seeing what we could add on to the work we did here. And maybe I'm unreasonably pessimistic about that. There are a couple of things we want to look at. Maybe I think the budget chairman on our side disagrees with the membership of the committee adding 4 people that essentially all become the deciding vote. Maybe they're ex officio members. Maybe there's another way to look at that. But Senator Whitehouse and I have talked about this. I think we are both committed to be part of a team that would offer this next year. I would have preferred that we vote this out and put the full responsibility on the Senate and House leaders to determine how to get this to the floor, rather than our committee being the point that failed. Again, I'll say, as I said the other day, there's nothing that we know today that we didn't know when we started about how the Senate works and how the House works. But I intend to vote yes, and certainly there are things I would have liked to have seen here that aren't here, but I think it was a legitimate bipartisan effort, well run by our 2 co-chairmen and their staffs, and I'm respectful and appreciative of that. And assuming I'm still here after everybody's given their speech of what they're going to do, I will intend to vote yes, but that's an assumption based on time. I'm going to do my best to stop talking right now and be here when it's time to vote. But I'll vote yes, and wish we could have pursued the final action in a different way. I'm disappointed by where we're likely to wind up, but I'm encouraged by the discussions we've had and the positive steps maybe we can still take based on those discussions.
Thank the gentleman. Any other members that wish to be heard? Gentlelady from Iowa.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and I'd also like to commend the members of the Joint Select Committee. I think there has been a lot of very positive discussion through the course of this past year. According to the statute that actually created this committee, we were tasked with providing recommendations to significantly reform the budget and appropriations process. Switching to a biannual budget resolutions is not, in my estimation, a significant reform. And in fact, we already do this. The very statute that created this committee was a 2-year budget agreement. Over the course of this markup, we have adopted some good amendments, but these changes aren't going to move the needle on the problems that we set out to address. We all had different and sometimes competing goals for this committee. However, every single person in this room agreed, at the very least, we should try to end our reliance on continuing resolutions and prevent government shutdowns, which produce billions of dollars in waste and benefit absolutely no one. Unfortunately, there's nothing in this package that will make CRs and shutdowns less likely. On Tuesday, a number of amendments were considered to require Congress to actually stay in Washington, D.C. until we complete our work, and this simple common sense proposition would address the very problem that we all wanted to fix. As Co-Chair Lowy mentioned on Tuesday, there are many causes to continuing resolutions and government shutdowns, including disagreements over policy riders. However, I would argue that this is exactly what we need to address these issues, as it would force Congress to stay in Washington and work together until we reach a resolution on these very disagreements. So I was disappointed to see those amendments fail. Simply put, again, this package does not significantly reform the budget and appropriations process. It does solve some problems, but not all, and not significantly. And for this reason, I will be voting no today. Senator Whitehouse, I appreciate the fact that you are willing to take a look at moving forward through a different package and perhaps a bill. And I appreciate the work that has been done by so many of my colleagues. We've been able to work through a number of various issues. We do need to continue working on this to significantly reform our budget and appropriations process. So again, I will be voting no today.
Any other members? Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to actually join Senator Ernst's observations about this bill. I agree entirely that the work has been very good. Your leadership has been extraordinary, both you and your co-chair. Just done in a Congress that can't seem to do anything. This place has been an environment, I think, that's been welcoming to people's ideas and progress and discussion. I know that there are much better ideas on that side of the aisle than are contained in this bill. And what I don't want is for this to become a pretext for doing the significant work that actually needs to be done. As I've said from the very outset, for me, dealing with the problem of the self-inflicted wounds created by the debt limit is something that we never were able to figure out. And the idea that we would perpetuate a system that is so damaging to America's economy and working families because we can't figure out some other way to resolve our disputes, I think is a real missed opportunity. So my hope, no matter what the votes are here, is that the work that has been done on both sides of the aisle together that is not yet contained in this proposal, that's the work we will continue to focus on and see if we can build an emerging consensus in the Congress that we've got to do the work differently for the American people. We really do need to do it differently. I mean, only here does the current situation make any sense at all. To Democrats in my state and Republicans in my state, I represent a state that's a third Republican, a third Democratic, and a third Independent. They all think this is ridiculous. And so for that reason, I'm going to vote no. It is not because I don't have enormous respect for the work that's been done, respect for all of you. It is because I feel like we have not addressed what is an urgent problem that my constituents, no matter what party they're in, deeply want us to address.
Any other members? Representative Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not lost on me that the same discussion we're having here, we sometimes have in the Republican conference. We don't end up with the continuing resolutions on the House side because the Appropriations Committee fails to get its work done. I'm sitting here with appropriation members from the House side. You all move things through your subcommittees all the time, but I'll sit down in conference and the leadership will say, well, we really have a problem with floor time. We can't get enough floor time to have these amendments, these bills considered, and then we're going to have to take some tough votes on some tough amendments. I want to protect my members from having to take tough votes because tough votes are very complicated. Don't want to get folks on the wrong side of an issue. And yes, we've got a statutory deadline, but we have some mechanisms. Why don't we just put this off till next year? And I think next year we'll be able to get it done in a more effective way. All of those arguments are true. They're true every single time we make them. I agree with Senator Bennett and Senator Ernst. There was much more that I wanted to do. I'm not sure we could have gotten the majority of the votes on the floor for those bolder ideas that we all have. I thought this was the place that we were going to start that conversation. Now, we exceeded the expectations of the standard set by the super committee. They didn't even get to a vote there at the end. They didn't produce a product that came to the floor. So we're at least going to raise the standard for bipartisan, bicameral committees. That we will produce the report that was we will have the vote that was statutorily required. But we have said in every single conversation that we've had, the missing ingredient was not good legislative language. The missing ingredient was political will to move forward. And we are going, if we fail today, are going to fail not because of legislative language. We're going to fail because we don't have enough trust, whether it be with our leadership or with our colleagues not on this bicameral, bipartisan committee, to move what we would all agree is a modest step forward. And if we can't move forward with modest steps, I don't know what encouragement we give to the next Congress to take even the bolder measures that so many of us here have built the trust and built the record to move forward. But I thank the chairman and I thank the co-chair for both of their leaderships. We would not even be meeting our statutory mandate without that leadership and the environment of partnership that you have created. So I thank you for that.
Other members? Senator Langford.
Chairman, thank you. Thanks again for all the work and all the organization, for the staff that worked on this exceptionally hard through the process. This was the place that I thought we would hammer through some very difficult ideas and then go sell them to the rest of the body, because the other members of the House and the Senate are not processing through what we're processing through. We were the ones tasked to do the research, to do the hard work, to think through the ideas, to look at the history, come up with a set of good bipartisan ideas, and then to be able to present it to the House and the Senate and go win them over and say this is a better solution. This is how we avoid debt ceiling fights and CRs and shutdowns, and this is how we solve all that mess. This is how we actually spend time looking at debt and deficit rather than every 10 years stopping to look at it, get a regular process. This is how we can get a bipartisan process. We all said that at the very beginning. We want a bipartisan process, and we all said at the beginning, the Senate's the problem. And it's interesting to me today that we started with, we can't get into a real conversation in the Senate right now. This was an opportunity to be able to say, let's set a set of proposals on vote-a-ramas and on process and things that actually get it through the Senate process and get us to a bipartisan work. We weren't able to do that, and that's disappointing to me. And I hope that we can continue this dialogue and we can bring a set of ideas to both of our bodies in the days ahead. But as Joni mentioned, our mandate began with significant reform. And my fear is that if we come out and have a vote, and even if it passes the House and the Senate, and everyone walks away and says, we now do budgeting every 2 years, we did our significant reform, we all know in this room nothing really changed. And we'll have the exact same issues next year again. And then everyone will say, I thought you significantly reformed the budget process, and now nothing works still. So I can't support this today. I would love to, but there are so many unfinished ideas that really are significant reform that I would hope that we would not spoil the opportunity to do those things by doing much, much, much less in the days ahead. So let's keep the conversation going. And I don't know what that structure will be to be able to do that, but this group knows more than most about the budget process, and I hope we can continue to have that dialogue with our peers.
Any other comments? Chair will take just a moment to opine.
Mr.
on,
Chair, I'm sorry.
Senator Perdue.
Would you like the last word?
I don't have to, but I'll be happy to recognize the
Well,
gentleman
I
from
just want to
Georgia.
make sure I have an opportunity. I'd love to hear your comments first, though, but I'd love to have a chance to make a comment.
Okay. I can kind of see where this whole discussion is headed, and it's very disappointing. I have a great admiration for the talent that's in this room and the commitment that everybody's made to the process, and value the differences of opinion, and the fact that we have been able to get to where we are, I think has probably shocked a lot of people that we're even in a position to see the finish line right ahead of us. I want to associate myself with the remarks of my colleague from Georgia, Rob Woodall, that I'm a football guy, and I believe in moving the chains. I believe in first downs. My father has always taught me that success is a cinch by the inch. It is hard by the yard. And that sometimes incremental improvement is better. In fact, all the time, incremental improvement is better than no improvement at all. We have a very low approval rating in America. I wish America was tuned in to this vote this morning to capture a glimpse as to just what the problem is in our country. That when the Congress of the United States, as mentioned by somebody on this panel a couple of days ago, the most important government on the planet cannot do its fundamental duty of budgets and appropriations on time, is an absolute travesty. And we have had an opportunity over several months to engage in a discussion, albeit with a very significant threshold for passage and reporting, 5 and 5, to be able to move the needle, move the ball, put America on a different path, and improve our situation. With all due respect to my friend from Iowa, I believe while it may not significantly improve the process, it does improve the process. And adopting what we have in front of us today would probably, and I would say likely, give us an opportunity to at least avoid the prospect of CRs and omnibus packages in the future. But we're not going to, apparently we're not willing to have the political will to make that decision here today. So here's what we've done. We've spent the last several months engaged in a very important, robust discussion about the problem. We have arrived at a solution. We're a little bit intimidated by what may or may not happen in the Senate, which has been the circumstance from the very moment that we gavelled the first meeting in. So we've gone all this way. We've produced a product that will move the needle, but yet we are unwilling to take that final affirmative vote to move it across the finish line and put it into the hands of leadership in the bodies of the House and the Senate. It's like the old saying of wetting oneself in a dark suit. You have a really warm feeling, but nobody notices. And that's precisely where we are at this moment. I'll yield to the gentleman from Georgia.
Well, first of all, I identify myself with your comments. I want to thank you and Co-Chair Loy. I think your hearts are definitely in the right place. I want to thank the members of this committee. We all have a lot of other things to do, but we've made a big step here. Whether we pass this out today or not, this is a continuum that started even before I got in the Senate 4 years ago. But some of you, along with other people who aren't on this committee, have been working for the last 4 years looking at why this system is so broken, what other people do, what are the best practices out there. And so this is a step that will build on that work And there are next steps that have to build on this work. But let's focus on, there are some good things here. And in an environment where we, Democrats, Republicans, House members, and Senate, are encouraged by everybody that influences us to be divided. We got gamed here, in my opinion, in many ways, by leadership, House, Senate, Republican, Democrat. And the sooner we, as individual people, start standing up to our leadership and do what's right, we're going to have speeches like yours and disappointment like mine that we have to wait till another day to fix what's been broken for 44 years. Let's look at what we did agree on, though, because there's some good news here. We passed 5 amendments. 3 were sponsored by Democrats. 2 were sponsored by Republicans, leading. There were amendments with Democrat and Republican cooperation. We passed the idea, the bill, the product that we have here agrees. We all agree that we need to go to biennial budgeting. We can still do that. We agree, Representative Kilmer came up with an idea that I think it was unanimous. We all agree. We need to have a state of the nation. We owe it to the people that we have to report to them the intransigence that we are involved in up here. And we can still do that. We agreed as a body, Democrats, Republicans, that we need to put tax expenditures on the line when we're talking about how we're spending the government's money, however you define what that is. Senator Schatz had that idea. He's had that idea since the first day I met him. Senator Whitehouse and I have talked about that for 4 years. Budget committee membership. The problem with the budget right now, not the budget, but our funding process, is that it's a 3-step process. Nobody else in the world, you can't find anybody else that has a 3-step process, whether it be a state, another government, or any individual corporation. Nobody does a 3-step. We do a budget, we do an authorization, and we do an appropriation. In the Senate, that will never happen. There aren't enough calendar days to do that. We have 12 appropriating committees, 16 authorizing committees. When I got to the Senate, we hadn't authorized the State Department of the United States for 13 years. Who are we kidding here? The Budget Committee needs to be made up of people who are engaged and involved in some of that authorizing and policy committee work, in my opinion. The Budget Committee Chairman of the Senate, the Republican, Mike Enzi, disagrees with that. That's a healthy disagreement, but I have a pretty strong opinion that we need to look at the membership. Senator Langford put that up. We agreed on that annual reconciliation. Senator Blunt put that forward, and I think we all agreed to that. We agreed on an optional path. Senator Whitehouse has been very strong and very constructive in driving ideas forward. We don't always agree on everything, but he and I, more than anybody else on both sides over the last 4 years, have struggled with what to do and how to get. He's responsible, as many of us are, of how this JSC got formed. And the fact that we may or may not pass this bill out, I'm not looking at this as a defeat. This is just another step to get things done, get this done. Let me remind everybody, it took 7 years to write the Budget Act of 1974. The Budget Act of 1974 may be the worst piece of legislation, I'll be kind, that I've ever read in my life. I had it in my briefcase to bring this morning. I wanted to show it because it is something that we will always look back on as a terrible piece of American history, in my opinion. We've just started this fight, co-chairs. I believe we have an opportunity to fix this. It's not going to get fixed in this JSC, in this environment, in the Senate and the House, but I still have hope that the American people are going to force us sooner or later to fix this. And if they don't, the bondholders of the United States will force us to do this sooner or later. There are a lot of solutions. I felt like that Senator Hirono had probably the best simple objective going into this that we had heard, and that was, look, I don't know all about this. She was very honest, but she said, I know this. Anything you come up with that would eliminate CRs, I'd be for. We didn't quite get there. We will get there eventually. We have to. But we did accomplish this year something, and I think we all need to look at this. Democrats were responsible for this just as much as Republican leadership in the majority in both the House and the Senate. So this is a bipartisan comment. Please accept it that way. But going into July 31st, we only had 12% of the discretionary budget in the United States funded this year. By the end of August, we had 75% and could have had 100% had it not been for a disagreement on border security. It's just that simple. We were that close. Why did that happen? Because we changed the process this year. We did a 2-year 3028 last year. This year, we didn't put authorizations in the Senate ahead of getting started to appropriate, and we started appropriations early. To Co-Chair Lowy's point, you know, in human endeavor, sometimes it's not the process, it's the human will to get it done regardless of the process. I agree 100%. The problem is we've only done that 4 times in 44 years. So eventually we have to fix this process. The Senate is the problem, and I believe right now that we have got to keep fighting for a politically neutral platform to fund this government, because without that, we'll never have a platform to stand on to solve this debt crisis. So I'm disappointed, Mr. Co-Chair. I want to be a yes on this. I really do. And yes, these are small steps, and yes, they do push the ball forward, but they will not achieve the objective we had for the Joint Select Committee, and that was to create a politically neutral platform to help us fund this government on time. And I do not want our colleagues in the House and the Senate, Democrat and Republican, to go home and tell people we have fixed this budget process, because we just won't. However, we have made great stride on agreement about things that we agree on, Democrat, Republican, House and Senate, that we can build on to close the gap and get this done. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Representative Arrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Madam Chair, thank y'all for the opportunity to serve with you on this great endeavor. It's great because I don't think there's any greater threat to the future of this country than the topic of discussion over the last several months. I'm grateful for the way you guys led and managed the process, to the comments that were made earlier. I think you kept the tone and the discussion very open, fair, and bipartisan. And I may have been the most strident, quite frankly, of the group. But I'm sure I'll be socialized over time. But I appreciate the tone, and I appreciate you keeping, this could have been derailed at a lot of junctures on the way to today. And so I think both of y'all are to be commended for your leadership. I'm grateful for the speaker for his appointment to this committee. I don't think all is lost. In fact, and I wrestle, and I think it's a fair and legitimate point to suggest that that which we were able to agree on, the 5 amendments that were articulated by Mr. Perdue, were not significant. I think that's a fair point. But relative to what gets done, or rather what doesn't happen, and what we don't produce, especially in a super committee, in a bipartisan, bicameral body like this, I would say relative to that, it is significant. And if this were the beginning of the end of this current dysfunctional, broken budget and appropriations process, if this were the beginning of the end of that, this would be monumental. So I think it's significant. I would have voted yes. I'll vote yes if we take a vote. In West Texas, a little progress is better than no progress. That's probably the spirit of my granddad choking up. A little progress is better than no progress. What's he say? What's the good book say, James? It's hope that is seen is no hope at all. There's some hope here that's not seen. We made real friendships and real traction and real progress. And even the 5 maybe not so bold amendments that would have passed aren't as significant, isolated. But I don't think those are even indicative of all that has been established that will carry on in time and produce the real bold results that we're all looking for. And we'll look back and we'll say this was the beginning of the end. So, yeah, I think the broken culture probably won today, but I'm going to keep fighting because this is just a symptom, like many, of the core problem, which is the culture of this place. And I won't go into all the details and enumerate the characteristics of the broken culture, but as I told my people, yeah, I want to go to Washington and change the course of this country. And I don't judge that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have any different motive than to make this country better, safer, and stronger. We just have a different view sometimes on how to get there. But more than changing the course, and if that's all we were able to do, I'd be disappointed. Because the real problem that we probably won't get into much is the culture of Congress. That's what's broken. This is just a symptom of it. And I hope I see the day that it is changed for the sake of the American people. So thank you again, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair. Thank you, my friends. I look forward to picking this ball up and running it down the field and punching it in and scoring some points for the American people. God bless. I yield back.
The question is on agreeing to the bill as amended and the report, including accompanying report language related to the amendments to the bill that were agreed to. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Blunt.
Blunt votes yes.
Mr. Blunt votes yes. Mr. Sessions. Aye. Mr. Sessions votes aye. Mr. Perdue. No. Mr. Perdue votes no. Mr. Woodall. Aye. Mr. Woodall votes aye. Mr. Langford. Mr. Langford votes no. Mr. Arrington. Yes. Mr. Arrington votes yes. Ms. Ernst. Ms. Ernst votes no. Mr. Whitehouse. Present. Mr. Whitehouse votes present. Mr. Yarmouth. Mr. Yarmouth votes aye. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett votes no. Ms. Roybo Allard. Mr. Roybo Allard votes present. Mr. Schatz. Mr. Schatz votes no. Mr. Kilmer. Mr. Kilmer votes aye. Mr. Rono. Mr. Rono votes present. Co-Chair Lowy. Co-Chair Lowy votes present. Co-Chair Womack.
Aye.
Co-Chair Womack votes aye.
Any member not vote or wish to change a vote? Clerk will tally.
Of the members appointed by the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader on this vote, the ayes are 5, the noes are 3. Of the members appointed by the House Minority Leader and the Senate Minority Leader, the ayes are 2, the noes are 2, with 4 present. The vote threshold is not met.
And as a result, the bill and accompanying report are not agreed to. That concludes today's business of the Joint Select Committee. The committee stands adjourned.